Right now, without thinking about it, you are doing something that no other creature on Earth can do, in quite the way you are doing it. You are processing the meaning of a stream of sounds that were shaped by a combination of air pressure, vibrating tissue, and the precise movement of a tongue, lips, teeth, and jaw, working in coordinated sequences that occur at a rate of approximately 12 to 15 phonemes per second. You are decoding this stream in real time, extracting from it not just concrete information about the world, but abstract ideas, hypothetical scenarios, emotional states, and intentions. And if you were to respond, you would produce a comparable stream of sounds with your own vocal apparatus, sounds shaped so precisely that another human being on the other side of the world, who grew up speaking the same language, could understand every word. The human voice is remarkable in ways that are easy to overlook precisely because it is so familiar. We use it constantly. We have been hearing it since before we were born. We produce it without conscious effort for most of the sounds we make. And this familiarity has made it nearly invisible as an object of scientific wonder. But when you examine the human vocal system carefully, in comparison with the vocal systems of other species and in the context of the evolutionary history that produced it, the degree to which it is genuinely extraordinary becomes clear. The human voice is not simply a louder or more complex version of primate vocalizations. It is a qualitatively different kind of system, operating on principles and achieving results that have no parallel in any other species. Let's begin with the basic biology. The linguist and evolutionary biologist W. Tecumseh Fitch at the University of Vienna has written what is probably the most comprehensive scientific account of the evolution of the vocal tract and language, his 2010 book, The Evolution of Language. Fitch makes a distinction that is crucial for understanding what makes the human voice unusual, the distinction between the sound source and the vocal tract filter. In all vertebrate vocalizations, sound is produced at a source, typically the larynx, and then shaped by resonance cavities in the vocal tract above the larynx before being emitted from the mouth or nose. In most animals, this filtering function is relatively simple and relatively fixed, producing a limited range of distinct sound types. In human beings, the filtering function is extraordinarily flexible, capable of producing the full range of sounds found across all of the world's human languages. The larynx, the primary sound-producing organ, is present in all mammals. It is a structure in the throat that contains the vocal folds, also called vocal cords, which vibrate when air from the lungs passes through them. The frequency of this vibration determines the fundamental pitch of the voice. The larynx itself is present in most terrestrial vertebrates, and many species use it to produce communicative sounds. What is distinctive about the human larynx is not its basic structure, but its position in the throat. In most mammals, including non-human primates, the larynx sits high in the throat, close to the base of the skull. This high position has a significant advantage. It allows the animal to breathe and swallow simultaneously, because the high larynx can be raised to seal the airway while food passes around it. In human adults, however, the larynx has descended to a much lower position in the throat, creating a long pharyngeal cavity above the vocal folds that functions as a resonating chamber. This descended larynx is one of the most anatomically distinctive features of the human vocal system and one of the most important factors in our ability to produce the range of sounds required for human speech. The reason the descended larynx matters so much is that it allows the tongue to move not just horizontally in the mouth, but also vertically in the pharynx, dramatically expanding the range of vowel sounds that can be produced. The linguist Philip Lieberman at Brown University, who has spent decades studying the evolution of speech, documented that the configuration of the human vocal tract allows the production of the full vowel space of human languages, including the extreme vowels like the sounds in beat, boot, and bat, which require radical changes in the shape of the supralaryngeal vocal tract that cannot be achieved without the descended larynx configuration. The cost of this anatomical arrangement is significant. The descended larynx means that in human adults, the airway and the food passage cross in the throat, creating the possibility of choking, which is considerably more likely in humans than in other mammals with a high larynx. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is a meaningful cost. An anatomical arrangement that increases the risk of choking must have conferred benefits significant enough to outweigh this risk. Those benefits, in the evolutionary account, were the communicative capabilities of the descended larynx. Interestingly, human infants are born with a larynx in a position similar to that of non-human primates. The larynx descends to its adult position during the first few years of life, in parallel with the development of speech production. This developmental trajectory is another piece of evidence for the relationship between larynx position and speech capability. The neuroscientist Tecumseh Fitch has also documented an important finding about larynx descent in other species. Some non-human species, including deer, lions, and koalas, have also evolved descended larynges, not for speech but for producing calls with lower fundamental frequencies that make the caller seem larger than they actually are. This suggests that larynx descent is not in itself unique to humans, but that the human use of the descended larynx for speech production is unique. The descended larynx is a tool that evolution has repurposed for the specific function of human language production. The second major component of the human vocal system's distinctiveness is not anatomical, but neural. The ability to produce the precise, rapid, and highly coordinated movements required for speech depends on a neural pathway that is not present in any other primate, a direct connection between the motor cortex and the neurons that control the laryngeal muscles. In non-human primates, the control of vocalization is mediated primarily by the limbic system, the evolutionarily ancient emotional processing system. This means that primate vocalizations are largely involuntary and emotionally driven. A chimpanzee cannot, in any meaningful sense, choose to make a particular sound independently of the emotional state that the sound is associated with. The scream is produced when the chimpanzee is frightened. The food call is produced when food is present. The vocalizations are tied to emotional and motivational states in a way that does not allow the kind of voluntary, intentional, and emotionally independent sound production that human speech requires. The neuroscientist Uwe Jürgens at the German Primate Center in Göttingen spent decades mapping the neural pathways involved in vocalization in primates and documenting the crucial difference between the limbic-mediated vocalizations of non-human primates and the corticobulbar-mediated vocalizations of humans. Jürgens found that the direct pathway from the motor cortex to the laryngeal motor neurons, which allows voluntary and precise control of the vocal folds, is substantially more developed in humans than in any non-human primate. This pathway is what allows human speakers to produce sounds that are not tied to emotional states, to produce the same sound in a wide variety of emotional contexts, and to learn new sounds that were not present in the ancestral vocal repertoire. This neural distinction is why language teaching works for humans in a way it does not work for chimpanzees. Chimpanzees can be taught to communicate through sign language or symbol boards because these systems bypass the vocal apparatus. But attempts to teach chimpanzees to speak, which were made extensively in the mid-20th century, largely failed, not because chimpanzees lack the cognitive ability to associate sounds with meanings, but because they lack the voluntary control over the laryngeal muscles needed to produce the sounds reliably and precisely. The comparative psychologist Michael Owren at Georgia State University conducted extensive research on the acoustic structure of primate vocalizations and documented another important dimension of the distinctiveness of human speech: its reliance on rapid temporal modulation. Human speech is produced at rates of 12 to 15 phonemes per second, a rate at which individual segments are produced and perceived at speeds that other animals cannot match. While many animals can produce complex sequences of sounds, the rate at which human speech operates is extraordinary, and the auditory processing system has evolved specifically to handle this rate of incoming information. The linguist Noam Chomsky at MIT, whose transformative influence on linguistics from the 1950s onward reshaped the scientific understanding of language, made an argument that connects the distinctiveness of the human vocal system to a broader claim about the nature of human language. Chomsky argued that the most important feature of human language is not its sound system, but its recursive grammar, the ability to embed structures within structures to an unlimited depth, producing sentences of unlimited complexity from a finite set of words and rules. The vocal system, in Chomsky's view, is the output channel for a cognitive system whose true distinctiveness lies in its grammatical structure. This argument has been enormously influential, but also enormously controversial. The linguist Daniel Everett at Bentley University has documented aspects of the Pirahan language of the Amazon that he argues challenge the claim that recursion is a universal feature of human language. And evolutionary linguists, including Fitch and Mark Hauser at Harvard, have proposed frameworks that attempt to identify which features of the human language system are genuinely unique and which are shared with other species. What the debate between Chomsky, Everett, Fitch, and others has made clear is that the human voice cannot be understood in isolation from the cognitive system it serves. The vocal tract produces sounds, but those sounds encode a linguistic system of extraordinary complexity, and understanding why the human voice is so remarkable requires understanding both the acoustic machinery that produces the sounds and the cognitive machinery that determines what sounds are produced and why. The acoustic phonetician Johan Liljekrantz at the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm has contributed another important dimension to the understanding of the human vocal system through his work on the mathematical structure of vowel systems across human languages. Liljekrantz and the linguist Björn Lindblom found that the vowel systems of human languages are not random, but show a striking cross-linguistic regularity. Languages tend to choose vowels that are maximally dispersed in the acoustic space available to the human vocal tract, maximizing the distinctiveness of each vowel relative to all others, and therefore minimizing the likelihood of perceptual confusion. This finding suggests that the structure of human vowel systems has been shaped not just by the anatomy of the vocal tract, but by the perceptual requirements of communication, by the need to produce sounds that can be reliably distinguished by the listener in a wide variety of acoustic environments. The human vocal system has been optimized, over the course of its evolution and the historical development of specific languages, for communicative efficiency in a way that reflects a deep integration between production and perception. The human voice is, in summary, the product of a set of anatomical, neural, and cognitive innovations that have no precise parallel in any other species. The descended larynx expands the vowel space. The direct corticobulbar pathway enables voluntary and emotionally independent vocal production. The auditory processing system handles information at rates that other species cannot match, and the cognitive system that the voice serves encodes information of a complexity and flexibility that exceeds any other communication system in the natural world. But there is one more dimension of the human voice that deserves attention, and it is perhaps the most remarkable of all: its capacity for music. The human voice is the only sound-producing organ in nature that is regularly and universally used for both language and music, across all human cultures. Every human culture sings. Every human culture uses the voice to produce sounds that are not primarily informational, but primarily aesthetic and emotional. And the voice that sings and the voice that speaks are the same voice, using the same anatomy in ways that overlap substantially but not completely. The musicologist Steven Mithen at the University of Reading has proposed, in his 2005 book The Singing Neanderthals, that the musical and linguistic capacities of the human voice may not have evolved together, but may represent two separate evolutionary developments that became integrated in the modern human vocal system. Mithen suggests that earlier hominins, including Neanderthals, may have had a vocal system capable of musical expression, what he calls holistic mimetic musical multimodal, before the full development of referential language. Whether or not Mithen's specific account is correct, the existence of both language and music as functions of the same vocal apparatus is a striking feature of the human vocal system that points toward its extraordinary evolutionary history and its deep integration with the full range of human cognitive and emotional life. The human voice is not simply a communication tool. It is one of the most complex, most flexible, and most deeply integrated biological systems in the natural world. And you have been using it, effortlessly and unconsciously, since the first sounds you made on the day you arrived in the world. There is one more dimension of the human vocal system that the standard accounts of its evolution tend to underemphasize, and that is the role of breath control in enabling the specific kind of sound production that human speech and song require. In most mammals, breathing is a largely automatic process, controlled by rhythmic neural circuits in the brainstem, circuits that operate independently of voluntary control and that maintain a relatively fixed respiratory rhythm. Human beings, uniquely among mammals, have developed a degree of voluntary control over breathing that allows us to interrupt, extend, compress, and modulate the respiratory cycle in the service of sound production. Singers and speakers routinely produce extended vocalizations that require breath support over periods of several seconds, managing the outflow of air from the lungs with extraordinary precision to maintain the phonation pressure required for clear sound production. The respiratory physiologist Alf Hubert Karlsson at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm has documented the degree to which trained singers develop conscious control over respiratory muscles that are normally operated automatically, including the intercostal muscles between the ribs and the muscles of the abdominal wall. Professional singers can maintain remarkably stable subglottal pressure across the full duration of a phrase, using these voluntarily controlled muscles to compensate for the natural decrease in lung volume as air is expelled. This degree of respiratory control is not simply a training artifact. It depends on a neural pathway connecting the cortex to the respiratory motor neurons that is more developed in humans than in any other mammal, a pathway that is closely related to the corticobulbar pathway connecting the cortex to the laryngeal muscles. The evolution of voluntary respiratory control and voluntary laryngeal control appear to have. The human voice has one more dimension that is worth examining carefully, and that is the extraordinary range of individual variation that it contains, and the extraordinary sensitivity of the human auditory system to that variation. Every human voice is unique. The combination of vocal fold size and mass, vocal tract length and shape, resonance characteristics of the nasal cavities and sinuses, habitual patterns of muscle tension and breath support, and the specific articulatory habits developed through a lifetime of speaking a particular language or set of languages produces a voice print that is as distinctive as a fingerprint. Human beings are extraordinarily good at recognizing individual voices, often from a single syllable or even from a single vowel sound. We recognize the voices of people we know, across telephone connections, through walls, in crowded rooms, and in contexts where other identifying information is entirely absent. The perceptual psychologist David Pisoni at Indiana University has spent decades studying voice recognition and has documented the degree to which the human auditory system extracts and stores information about individual vocal characteristics alongside information about the linguistic content of speech. When you hear someone speak, you are simultaneously processing what they are saying and who is saying it, and both kinds of information are stored in memory in ways that remain accessible over long periods. The voice, in Pisoni's account, is not simply a medium for transmitting linguistic information. It is itself a rich source of information about the speaker, encoding not just their identity, but their emotional state, their social background, their physical characteristics, and their communicative intentions. This multidimensional information is available because the human vocal system is genuinely multidimensional in its operation. The same laryngeal mechanism that produces the segmental sounds of language also produces the pitch patterns that encode emotion and social meaning. The same supraglottal vocal tract that shapes vowels and consonants also shapes the resonance patterns that carry individual vocal identity. The same respiratory system that provides breath support for speech also modulates the rhythm and prosody that carry the phrasing and emphasis of spoken language. The voice is, in the most literal sense, a whole-body instrument. It integrates the lungs, the respiratory muscles, the larynx, the pharynx, the mouth, the nose, the nasal sinuses, and the neural systems that coordinate all of these components into a single, unified, extraordinarily flexible sound-producing system. No other species has developed an instrument of comparable complexity or comparable expressive range. The nightingale produces sounds of extraordinary beauty, but cannot generate the linguistic complexity of a sentence. The humpback whale produces calls of remarkable structure and apparent meaningfulness, but cannot produce the vowel contrasts that distinguish the words of human language. The parrot can mimic human speech with startling accuracy, but cannot, as far as we can determine, use the sounds it produces to generate the open-ended novel utterances that human language requires. The human voice alone combines all of these dimensions: linguistic complexity, emotional expressiveness, individual identity, musical capability, and the social signaling functions that connect it to the deepest levels of mammalian communication. And it does all of this through a system so thoroughly integrated into the human body and the human mind that we use it without thinking, hear it without analysis, and recognize it without effort. The voice you use is the result of hundreds of millions of years of evolution. It is the most sophisticated sound-making system in the natural world, and it belongs entirely and uniquely to you. There is a final observation worth making about the human voice that connects all of the dimensions we have explored, and it has to do with the relationship between the voice and the sense of self. The voice is the most intimate of all the sounds we hear. We are surrounded by our own voice, from the inside, in a way that we are not surrounded by any other sound. When you speak, you hear your voice both through the air, as the sound travels from your mouth to your ears, and through bone conduction, as the vibrations of your larynx and vocal tract travel directly through the bones of your skull to your cochlea. This bone-conducted component is why your voice sounds different to you on a recording than it sounds in your head. The recording captures only the air-conducted component, while your habitual experience of your own voice includes both. This intimate relationship between the voice and the self has been explored by the philosopher and phenomenologist Don Ede at Stony Brook University in his account of what he calls auditory phenomenology. Ede argues that the voice is not simply a tool that the self uses to communicate with others. It is constitutive of the sense of self, part of the medium through which the self is experienced from the inside. The voice that thinks in words, that generates the inner monologue of conscious experience, that rehearses conversations before they happen and replays them after they have occurred, is not separate from the self that is doing the thinking. It is part of the substance of that self. The linguist Deborah Tannen at Georgetown University has documented the degree to which the stylistic features of individual voices, their rhythm, their pitch patterns, their characteristic ways of organizing conversational turns, carry cultural and social identity in ways that go far beyond the referential content of the words they produce. The voice you use marks where you grew up, who you grew up with, what social communities you belong to, and how you understand your place in the social world. The voice is, in summary, simultaneously biological and cultural, individual and social, ancient and modern. It is the product of evolutionary pressures, stretching back hundreds of millions of years, shaped by the specific history of the human lineage, expressed through the specific cultural and linguistic environment in which each individual speaker developed, and realized in the completely unique acoustic instrument of each individual human being. It is ordinary only in the sense that it is everywhere. In every other sense, it is one of the most extraordinary phenomena in the known world. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you find this video interesting, please consider subscribing for more content like this.